All the bass fishing pros will tell you a frog will put the hammer on them if you want to catch big bass. There is so much information though on frog fishing, and it can be extremely overwhelming. When I first started getting into bass fishing, I really wanted to catch bass on frogs. It looked so fun and so cool. I wanted to experience those big blow-ups and haul them out of that thick cover. Yet I struggled with hookups. I didn't understand why I would catch them sometimes and then other times not. It was also confusing to me all the different types of frogs that were out there. When I would go to the tackle shops or browse online, everybody would say they were using a frog, but they weren't crystal clear on what frog they were using and why it worked. So I dove in and started experimenting and using a frog. I watched a lot of pro tournaments where they were fishing frogs to win, and I started noticing some things that they were doing that I wasn't. I also discovered some really cool tricks on my own that really helped elevate my frog fishing game. Through these lessons that I've learned, I now catch a lot more bass on a frog. It is actually one of my favorite lures to catch them on because it is so unique and cool. I'm able to recognize what the right situation is, what the right frog is. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. Those things that I learned and the 5 mistakes that game changed my frog fishing that I was doing wrong, that hopefully you don't do, so that you can go out and catch more bass on a frog. All right, let's talk about these frog fishing mistakes. Now, I guess you can say this is going to be a little bit biased, you know, and I'm not here to tell you that this is the only way to catch bass on frogs. There are a lot of ways out there, and I know they work for a lot of different people, but what I'm hoping to share with, and hopefully what you've recognized about my channel, is I talk about the general overarching principles of what you should be looking at to be able to read the situation that you're in, to be able to pick the best frog for you, to be able to catch them so that you can go out and catch way more big bass on a frog. As a bass fishing guide, I've fished with a frog for over a decade. I've tried all different types and kinds and fished it in all kinds of situations. You're gonna see these big picture principles of when I'm telling my clients to tie on a frog and how to work them right so they can catch bass like you will be able to after you watch this video. So let's get cracking. Mistake number 1, using the wrong frog. This is something that actually took me a long time to get dialed in. I remember wanting to get into bass fishing frogs about a decade ago. There just wasn't a lot of options. A lot of them just seemed super stiff, super cheap, and I wasn't super confident in the colors and the things that they had going on to be able to want to tie the ones on that I saw. Especially out in my tackle shops here in Utah where I'm located, where everybody's way more wired for trout fishing. The frogs in the shops just look garbage. It was a super poor selection, to say the least. So while I was diving into bass fishing online, one day I stumbled across this video. It was a bass pro, Cody Meyer, and he was actually bank fishing with a frog. He was out in Clear Lake, California, and this frog that he was using, oh my gosh, I watched him catch 3-pounder, 4-pounder just along the bank. I'm like, this must be a good frog. What is this thing? I need to try it. So I picked that sucker up, and literally I remember going out with my brother on a little inflatable raft at our highly pressured pond that we fished. First time ever really throwing a frog, and I think my 3rd cast, go boom, smoked like a 3-pounder, and I was hooked. And I'm obsessed with this frog, and I still use it to this day. I haven't found a reason to switch. This is the frog right here. It's called the Jackal Iobee frog. And there's 3 reasons why I love this frog and continue to use it. And these 3 things will help you also pick out a good frog that you like. What's also interesting about this Jackal Iobee frog, I've seen it, this little bait has won several tournaments, but because it's not a big sponsored lure, a lot of times they'll just say frog. So If you don't know what you're looking for, you would have never recognized it, but it's the Jackal Iobee frog. The three things that make this frog great you should look for is look how wide of a gap there is between the top of the hook. Let's see if I can get this to focus. There we go. Top of the hook to the bottom. There's a lot of travel so that you get, look how much space there is when you push down on that to be able to get that hook into that fish's mouth. It's really easy to hook them up on this thing. That's what I'm looking for in a frog, because if you get bites and don't hook them, your frog sucks. Then number two, I already alluded to it, is this body is super, super soft. I wish I had like a pressure gauge or something, but this thing you just blow on it. And you notice how the frog is designed too. It actually creates more gap because they have this hollowed out space underneath. So you get more hook into them. You don't have a lot of extra fluff on the top. And that's what's really cool about the design of this frog. The other thing that's critical is the weight of your frog. And if you can see, the weight's more towards the butt. And what that does is it allows it to walk a lot easier when you're twitching it. If you get things too far forward, the weight keeps it flat and it just kind of goes straight forward. But if you get the weight more in the back of the frog, it tends to make it sit down in the water better. It also helps it walk more. Those are the three things I look for in a frog: the wideness of the gap, how collapsible the body is, and the weight of where it's placed. Now you shouldn't make the mistake of picking the wrong frog. Mistake number two, I remember first throwing a frog, I really struggled to know how to work it exactly right. It seemed like I wasn't doing it right, wasn't getting a ton of bites. By watching a ton of bass fishing videos, you'll see the pros, they'll work it really, really fast, especially tournaments out on the Mississippi River. I think Jacob Wheeler was winning this one and he was just twitching it so fast. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is fascinating. I need to start doing that. And I did. I started just working my frogs quicker, making them side to side, quick action. And man, I'll tell you what, you get a lot more fish doing that. It elicits a little bit of a reaction strike from them because they don't want to see that frog get away. Now, obviously, there are times where you want to just twitch, twitch, let it set, twitch, twitch, let it set when the bite's tough and it's hard going, but that fast twitch, getting it to walk across, is a game changer, and you can cover a lot of water and find those more active fish. Even though I recognize that as the key to walking the frog, I've learned a hack that I've never heard anybody else share before, but you can get your frog to walk a lot easier if you tie, instead of your traditional bass fishing knot or whatever fishing knot you use, you want to use a loop knot. And the loop knot is awesome because it creates more freedom for your frog to go side to side as you pull it, and your frog will walk so much easier, so much better. So try tying on a loop knot, you'll catch a lot more fish. Mistake number three, color. Frog color. There are so many different colors of frogs. It can be really overwhelming and confusing. I'm going to walk you through my methodology for picking out the best color for a frog so that you don't waste your money on a frog that's really good but it's the wrong color and you're not catching fish. You know, there's so many colors. There's green, there's white, there's brown, there's chartreuse, there's pink. You know, all these different colors under the rainbow that they're making on these frogs. And I tried a lot of those colors, you know, the whites, the browns, the brights, all those different things. What I've discovered is what's most important to know what color frog to use is the water clarity of where you're fishing. Let me explain. So the dirtier, the muddier, the less visibility there is in the water, you want to use those high contrast colors. You want to use the whites, the blacks, the chartreuses, those big standout colors when things are dark and dirty. Then in the clear water, I go with like the greens, the more natural hues, like the pearl bellies, because that's what frogs have. Most people get hung up on the color of their frog and they only look at the top. The top of the frog is different than the bottom of the frog. The bass actually don't really see the top of your frog. They see the belly because they're up underneath. That thing sits on the surface. So make sure you're looking at the color of the belly. What's frustrating with frogs and their packaging, a lot of times you can't even see the belly in the packaging because they just have the top part showing. You're like, wow, that's definitely trying to attract fishermen, not trying to attract bass. So make sure you look at the belly of your frog, know what color it is, and pick the color that best suits the situation that you're in. To give you an elevated experience, I have a free lure color selector. It's down in my show notes, and you can use that to be able to pick a really good color for your frog, be able to catch more bass on them. Personally, I just go with 2 colors. As you can see, I'm a big fan of like these bluegill color style frogs because I fish a lot of clear water. And the second color I use is a black frog. You can fish a black frog in thick, heavy stuff when they can't see you so well. It creates a nice contrast. And I use this when it's more clear, sunny, bright, and they can see really well. Those are the 2 colors I use. Mistake number 4. I've got a story to go along with this. This story's happened so many times to me, you'd think I'd learn by now, but one of the mainstream bass pros, I've got this new frog, it's so sweet, it's this popping frog, and I'm like, oh, that looks awesome. I love the idea of a popping frog to create more commotion on the surface, and I'm like, oh, sweet, I'm gonna get one of those. I bought this black popping frog. I'm like, oh, this thing looks good, good colors. It seemed like a really, really good frog. I went out and tested it at my local pond where there's just a ton of fish. I like to throw lures where I know there's lots of fish to know if they're gonna work or not. I think this first cast, boom, a big one come up and swooped it, and I missed it. I'm like, oh, this lure is so awesome, this popping frog. Then I did it again. Another cast, boom, missed it. Couple more casts, boom, another one missed it. Literally, I missed 20 fish on this black popping frog. I only landed 1, and it was kind of evening, it got dark. I was so frustrated, like I bought this frog, it told me it was to be awesome, and in the daylight, it became extremely apparent what the problem was. It was the hooks. They were garbage. The way this frog was designed, there was almost no way for a bass to actually get the hook in its mouth. I learned that where your hooks are positioned on your frog makes all the difference in the world. And I'm going to show you a little trick that I wish I would have learned a long time ago. Is you take your pliers, you grab your frog, you make sure that you bend those hooks up and out. You can also replace your frog hooks. I also sharpen my frog hooks to keep them sticky because those bites, when they come, you don't want to miss them. And if your hook's dull at all, that extra penetration can make a big difference in your hookup ratio. Mistake number 5. I remember one of the first times I was out fishing a frog, I was with my dad. It was a Saturday morning. There were a ton of other boats around, and I started throwing the same frog I showed you earlier in my video. This Iobee frog. I was throwing it, third cat, boom, caught a 3-pounder, boom, caught a 5-pounder, boom, caught another 3.5-pounder. My dad's like, what? I want to throw one of those frogs. And I had a few of them, so I gave one to him. He started fishing the same frog I was, and he got really frustrated really quick. I remember him, I think he only landed like 2 fish all day, snapped a couple of the frogs off, and I think I caught like 10. The big difference was the quality of his gear. He was using an ultra soft rod with light fluorocarbon line, and it just wasn't working. Here's what I use for a frog that's made such a big difference in connectivity. Number 1, your rod stiffness. Usually you're casting a frog pretty far and you need a lot of leverage. I go for a long rod to make long casts and a heavy rod to get a lot of leverage to be able to hook them up better. Medium heavy, heavy action is the best for throwing a frog. Then number 2 is the type of line you're using. Fluorocarbons, monofilaments, they have some stretch in them. If a fish grabs it, there might be some stretch to where that hook doesn't get it up into them. When you look at a frog, like they have got to go through plastic and get the hook up into their mouth. You can achieve a much faster connection with braided line because it has 0 stretch. That's what I primarily throw when I'm fishing frogs to be able to hook up on them better. The only problem with the braided line though, in crystal clear water, they can see that braided line because it's not clear, translucent like your other fluorocarbon lines are. There's a balance there. They'll still hit it with the braided line. Key is to just kind of walk it a little bit faster. But I've also found you can get away with fishing a frog with fluorocarbon line if you have the right one that walks really well. They have some topwater lines now where the line actually floats. That helps walk it better too. Really make sure you're using the heavy enough, thick enough line that has zero stretch, low stretch, and you'll be able to catch more fish on a frog. Remember, you can't hook up a bass using that 90s spinning rod ugly stick that you have in your garage, okay? You've gotta have a heavier action rod, and you know what I'm talking about. Sure, that rod is still around, but it sucker bends like crazy. For those of you that watch my videos, you know I throw a bonus tip, and it's usually the best one. The biggest frustration everybody has is seeing fish hit their frog and missing them over and over and over again. And I've already given you some great tips earlier in the video to help with that. But the hook set, okay, let's talk about the hook set. The hook set absolutely has to be on point. Most people miss their frogfish because they suck at setting the hook. Sorry, but that's the reality. If you're using the right equipment and you're still not hooking them, it's your hook set. Here's what I want you to do next time a bass sucks down your frog. Instead of seeing the blow up and just ripping it, I want you to see that blow up and reel down, okay? Reel down and feel the fish. Make sure it's on there. This will do two things. Number one, when you reel down, it allows the bass to get it and kind of go down with it. They'll hold on to it for 10, 15 seconds pretty routinely. So they'll come up, they'll swallow it, and they'll go down. So you reel down, and then you pull to make sure the fish is on there. Now, when you reel down and you're in that process and you go to pull, but you see your frog float back up, okay, that's fine. Then you didn't just rip the frog out of the spot. You can actually, oh, okay, and then twitch it a couple times, and then they'll come up and hit it again oftentimes. Then this time you reel down and you actually feel the weight of the fish. It feels tight. Then you lean up, pull hard all the way back, reel down, and that'll give you way more leverage to straighten out that line because you got to pick up all the slack in your line. You got to do all of that. If you do this one thing, this bonus tip, your frog hookups will go way up through the roof. Reel down, and then boom, wait till you feel the fish, and then you hammer on them. It'll keep your bait there in case they miss it the first time, because they literally have to get the entire, if they hit it from the front or knock it from the bottom, they're not getting hooked up. They absolutely have to swallow a frog in order for you to hook them. A lot of times bass miss. They're not 100% accurate all the time. I'd love to hear more about what you've learned about fishing a frog. Drop a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out my other one, this one right here. This is a really good one. A lot of people have helped them with their bass fishing. And as always, stay stoked.